Hello, selamat sejahtera dan selamat datang ke episod Kita Family ke-20. We are at episode 20 and so excited that we made it here. Thank you very much for your continuous support and we are really happy to have you with us today. Sebagai permulaan, Kita Family ni di sini kami membincangkan perihal yang berkaitan dengan makna serta kepentingan hidup bermasyarakat, menghargai keunikan serta kepelbagaian sesama kita dan meraihkan masyarakat yang berbilang agama, kaum, kepercayaan, rupa dan juga keupayaan. Kami menghargai hidup secara inklusif yang mengambil kira keperluan segenap lapisan masyarakat, terutama bagi mereka yang kurang atau berkelainan upaya. Topik kami di Kita Family Podcast hari ini adalah persahabatan ataupun friendships dalam konteks perkembangan socio-emosi or social-emotional development and social-emotional learning. So we're going to mengupas satu topik yang agak besar in the context of persahabatan. And with me, we have Desiree.
Hai, salam sejahtera.
And Kakak SK.
Apa khabar?
Actually, we are missing two of our fellow Kita Familians today. Didi unfortunately couldn't join us from Kota Kinabalu due to some health issues. But she'll be back very soon, just temporary. And Nori has finally decided to take her own advice from the last episode and give herself a bit of time for some things that need to be given priority. So, kami di Kita Family sangat bangga bahawa Nori telah mengikut apa nasihat yang diberi pada episod yang lepas dan menggunakan masa untuk memberi keutamaan kepada apa yang perlu bagi dia pada minggu ini. But like Didi, she will be back. So watch out for this. So you have three of us today and we're going to discuss pembelajaran socio-emosi. That's a big word.
Yes.
Very big word. So Kakak SK, can we start with a bit of an overview of what this is?
Okay, let me try to mengupaskan lah ya.
Yes.
Mengapa kami malam ini, hari ini bincang-bincangkan perkara sosial ni sebenarnya as a individual or in fact as a group, there is a phrase, we memang social being.
Yes.
Kan?
Yeah.
Social being for us is we can't live by ourselves, kesempurnaannya kalau dalam daily activity ke friendships ke family, we need to have friends, because as a social individual or as a group, we also hear about the words tribe, kan? So kami selalu secara almost natural, we will need to have interaction, physical interaction, social interaction, which leads actually essentially to relationship interaction. Then that pulls in, I believe, that part about the emotional part, kan? Because to have a relationship, we need to learn social cues, we need to know how to read unspoken, we need to try to understand unspoken expected or unspoken behaviors,
Body language,
social cues, whether spoken or unspoken. So put together, social-emotional, almost, if you like that word, almost is cannot be really separated, because fundamentally that social-emotional relationship will provide us safety. Yeah, I think we've spoken about safety quite a few times. We need to build that socialization, the emotion, whether it's a positive emotion, being happy, or what is perceived as negative emotion. These emotions are important for survival. Yeah. So overall, socio-emotional being is necessary for us to be part of an individual, groups, part of family, essentially for survival.
Thank you. Well, Desiree, if I were to say, there are probably 5 key social emotional learning areas. And they are, I'll say it in English first.
Okay.
Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills and responsible decision making. So secara rumusan ada 5 kategori atau 5 butir terperinci berkenaan pembelajaran sosio-emosi, iaitu kesedaran diri sendiri, pengurusan diri sendiri, kesedaran sosial, kemahiran untuk menjalini perhubungan dan bertanggungjawab dan membuat keputusan secara berfikir dan bertanggungjawab. So technically those 5 areas. Would you have anything to add to that?
Sebenarnya banyak tu 5 area, and kalau kita balik kepada definisi autism, saya selalu tekankan tentang the two out of the 3 main criteria ada perkataan social di sana. Social communication and social interaction. Memang sangat mencabar untuk kawan-kawan kita yang neurodivergent. Sometimes kami yang typical pun susah nak baca emosi, non-verbal cues, tak senang. And if you look at communication, sebab actually my undergrad, I did my degree in communication. Don't quote me, I don't remember the exact percentage, but a very high percentage of communication is non-verbal.
Exactly.
I think it's somewhere between the 80 to 90 percentile.
Pretty high.
Tetapi, kami selalu tekankan, especially untuk kanak-kanak yang neurodivergent, yang belum bercakap, kami tekankan sangat tentang bertutur, speaking, talking, because that is the main, we know it as the main means of communication. Tetapi the non-verbal part of it is more important, kan? Sebab it's 80 percentile, is more than 50%. So maybe if I can bring us back to topik yang kita nak bincangkan hari ini, memang berkaitan dengan social-emotional. Kami juga ingin membincang tentang persahabatan, kan, dan friendship, sebab ini adalah salah satu area di mana mencabar untuk some of our children yang neurodivergent. Ada yang neurodivergent autistic suka berkawan, very friendly, kan? They will go up to a person, but itu pun boleh jadi mencabar, sebab maybe the person on the receiving end tak faham the over friendliness. Tetapi ada juga yang maybe tak pandai berkawan, tak mahu berkawan, kan? And there are many different, it's a spectrum lah, kan? Kami pun sebagai neurotypical, kita memilih kawan kita. So dari segi persahabatan and friendships, maybe saya boleh share sedikit, kan, tanggapan saya untuk anak saya. Dari kecil lagi, saya selalu berfikir macam ni, sekiranya anak saya tidak mahu berkawan dan dia sangat happy, he's fulfilled, apa salahnya? Right? So for me, friendships for my son was difficult lah in the early days. Memang dia tak suka kanak-kanak lain. Not to say tak suka lah. Tak suka is a very strong word. It had, other children had no impact on him. Kan? There can be a child there tapi dia tak mahu bermain. So I never tak paksa, memang saya pun tak rasa sedih, oh kesian Hans tak ada kawan. No, it wasn't that for me. Tapi I want to acknowledge ada parents yang rasa macam tu. But the reason why I bring this up, sebab ia berkaitan juga dengan my upbringing dan personality saya sebagai individu. Memang dari kecil saya sebenarnya tak pandai berkawan. And when I tell this to people now, it's very hard for them to believe. Memang kecil-kecil saya tak pandai berkawan kerana saya membesar di Negeri Sembilan. Rupa pun lain sedikit. Always get teased in school. So I retreated. Tetapi yes, I felt upset for being teased. Tetapi saya taklah sedih tak ramai kawan. I was happy being on my own. So bila ada anak seperti itu, saya pun terasa macam okay lah. Tak heran. Maybe it's not even the autism. Maybe dia just macam mak dia. Tak suka atau tak pandai berkawan. But we will come to the point later, I think, as we discuss.
Tak pandai berkawan atau memilih kawan?
Yes, memilih. So I think we will come to that a bit later. So I want to give the opportunity to my kakaks to also elaborate on their thoughts on friendships.
Yes.
For our children.
So Kakak SK, what do you think is essential to build relationship skills?
Yeah, I think, originally when we started, when you asked about the 5 attributes, but if I tie it back to what Desiree has shared, there is a lot about socialization. Sebenarnya dipelajari. It is a culture, right? It is the context. Of what is comfortable, what is acceptable. And in one of the programs that we run called Social Thinking, there's a phrase that we use, what is expected. Yeah. Sebenarnya, what you described just now is you are comfortable,
Yes.
right, in being in a smaller number of friendships, but some families are used to quite robust and many more friends around them. So that's why social learning is learned. Yeah, this phrase about social-emotional learning is actually a learned habit. We can say that, but it's also an attribute of social awareness that you are accepting. This whole word again about coming back to context of kita family is in neurodiversity. When we are aware, we become more accepting. So rather than say the friendship must look like this, the pressure from usually adults and of course kami dewasa ni ibu bapa ataupun guru-guru, we set an expected rule, but actually friendship is very, very complex. Bila taruh rule, you will set them perhaps to failing that rule, kan? Yeah. So part of us understanding socialization is that big word, the awareness that we must be able to accept different type of socialization behavior
and allow it to grow organically. So perkembangannya perlulah secara organic.
Yes.
Dan bukan dipaksa. I think that's what Kakak is trying to say, right?
Yes, and we had this discussion very early on. But as we say this, don't paksa, tapi sebenarnya we must be aware for our children on the spectrum and many children with different minds. We also need to model, correct?
Yes.
We model macam mana nak salam, correct?
Yep.
We model if you go to Chinese New Year in Malaysia, particularly in Malaysia when we berpagai kaum, right? So a lot of this has to be taught, kena dipelajari, right?
Betul.
Kalau kongsi facoy is Chinese New Year, right?
And you need to do this.
That's right. And for Malaysian, when we say hello, we actually salam. Or we put a hand in our heart.
Yes.
Now, if we extend that to our children on the spectrum, now they need to intentionally be modeled or taught
And guided accordingly.
and guided.
Yes.
So on one hand, it can be quite tricky for parents. That's why we need to be aware. They may need to learn the behavior, but not to the extent of dipaksakan. And it's quite easy to see when dipaksakan, the child or the adult or the individual is very uncomfortable, right? They are very unhappy. So if you have a socialization push that makes somebody unhappy, tak gembira, quite oxymoronic kan?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that would be a flag we will look out for. The difference between acceptance, the difference between helping our charge to push the boundary, so to say. Lah.
I actually want to acknowledge how lucky we are in Malaysia because we grew up in such an environment, and I speak for myself because I grew up in Ipoh in a Punjabi family with our grandmother living with us, and we were blessed. And so I learned to speak 3 languages almost at the same time. So because I had to speak to my grandmother in Punjabi, she spoke nothing else other than Bahasa Pasar, which I was not going to speak. I spoke Bahasa Melayu, Logat Perak with my neighbours because that's who I used to play every day, kawan-kawan pukul 4 sampai maghrib. And then we used to have English at home with my parents. So we had the best of both worlds in that way. But I think apa yang saya juga perasan is there was always people coming home. And so we were not allowed to just stay in our room. We had to come out, we had to greet them, and we had to greet them appropriately. So similarly, kalau kawan yang berbangsa Melayu datang salam. Kalau yang berbangsa Cina, call auntie, call uncle.
That's right.
Right? And then kalau yang Punjabi, Sat Sri Akal. With the Indian one, also put your hands together and say, hello uncle, hello auntie. But it was just expected. Memang tidak diberi pilihan kepada kami bila kami membesar untuk tidak datang dan memulakan satu percakapan. And so in a way, we were guided that way. And because we went out to play, geng jiran main pukul 4 sampai maghrib, that created our own rules per se, you know, and this I want to friend you, you don't want to friend me, all happened there. But I think today we grew up in more nuclear families. We don't go out to play as of right. And bila perkara itu jadi, some of the things that we take for granted, anak-anak kita ini perlu dibimbing dengan lebih teliti. Kerana mereka tidak mempunyai exposure yang sama seperti zaman saya dahulu. So itulah apa yang saya rasa menjadi cabaran yang paling besar kepada kesemua keluarga. Bukan sahaja yang neurotypical tapi yang neurodivergent.
Yes, that's a very good point actually, Anit. Memang I think kami semua dari generasi tersebut, right? We are taught to, even for me, the introvert selalu suka duduk dalam bilik baca buku. If there's a guest in the house, keluarlah and at least greet them. And of course, we model that to our kids sekarang. Maybe it takes a bit more effort with our neurodivergent kids. Tetapi I just want to throw out a discussion here as well. A lot of our cultures as well, we tend to hug children. We tend to kiss them on their cheeks. I mean, I didn't like it as
Shuffle
a
the
kid.
hair.
You know, I used to be terrified of one particular uncle who will carry me and he will bite me on my cheeks, you know. So I was, I'm very conscious about that. Memang kita nak ajar anak kami bersopan, beradab. To, in the case of my son, dia memang tak boleh bercakap. So it's macam ni with his hands, or he says baba. So I always joke, he is Hawaiian. He says hello and goodbye. I said baba.
Yeah.
So it becomes a topic of discussion as well. Tetapi saya tidak paksa dia untuk memeluk atau dipeluk. Right? So I think that's something that, I don't know, how do you handle that, Anit, with
I think because I grew up with this big Punjabi family, and touchy-feely hugging is part of it.
Big part of it, right?
A big part of
Yes.
it. And we've got this thing called japi, which is a big hug. so we grew up with that. Itu menjadi satu kebiasaan.
Yes.
Tetapi saya rasa bila saya ada anak neurodivergent dan beliau memilih siapa yang beliau ingin memberikan satu pelukan dan siapa beliau tidak mahu memberikan pelukan, I had to take a step back dan saya perlu memikir semula that saya tak boleh paksa.
Yes.
Yes. So that was one of my learnings from my child. I'm grateful for that learning because now there's a lot of research to say that really shouldn't be forced, because that we can encourage if we think it's right, but sometimes we don't know that there's a predator among the family.
Yes. Absolutely.
Actually, I want to ceritakan
Yes.
pasal pelukan ni. In the context of Joshua, when he's very little, he's very, very huggable. That's his nature. And it so happened dalam keperluan proprioception that he has, proprioception is what we call a sensory need, or rather a sensory ability of joint space where your body is. Now, Joshua has a strong need for pressure and for hugs. And for him, what it translated to in the natural daily greeting, or each time he greets somebody, whether it's family member or in school or a stranger, he will almost naturally hug the person. Now, that's really nice when you are in kindergarten.
Yes.
Maybe as you are growing up, it is still nice. However, one day, I hear that at school, they had started to teach the children, not just Joshua, that you need, as you're growing up, you need to be more appropriate with your age, and you need to be able to say no if you do not want that hug. That was the discussion. Kan?
Yeah.
So
I think they would have discussed a space bubble.
they would have discussed what is appropriate,
Right.
who are your circle of friends,
Circle of friends.
family. Yeah. So amongst that, but what I wanted to share is it was quite a difficult experience for Joshua and even for me to recognize that actually his autistic trait of needing this hug also needed to be relearned. Yeah. Whilst on one hand, he needed the hug. It wasn't just the hug, he needed the pressure that will calm him down, right? But we also needed to be aware socially of, as they grow up, all the social pressures of predators and so forth. Yeah. So the way it turned out for us is he learned it. He had to understand that this is the behavior that is appropriate, but he also had to learn that it's part of safety, and part of that is the journey of transiting what is a need to what is needed for safety. Yeah. So in a way, coming back to socialization really is a learned culture, and it is a learned behavior. Now, why is that important? I am very, actually, in my experience, either professionally or with my children, I would lean towards giving the children opportunity to learn about socialization very concretely, because it doesn't come to them naturally. If you look at the diagnosis of the diet of autism, sebenarnya dia ada dua. One is social communication challenge, and the other is that need for repetitive behavior to calm them down. So kalau dia challenge, we need to slowly allow them to learn and feel safe, and then they can expand their ability, which is otherwise hidden. Kan?
That's a really, really good way to tie it all in, because ultimately, bila kita ada diagnosis autisma, memang perkara yang paling kerap dibincangkan adalah berkenaan masalah sosial. So on that note, we're going to take a short break and we will come back when we discuss friendships and how to improve them. See you soon. Hello, selamat kembali ke Kita Family Podcast. Hari ini kami tengah membincangkan topik berkenaan persahabatan dalam konteks pembelajaran socio-emosi. So ini adalah satu daripada elemen setelah kami mengupas konsep yang besar itu yang kami akan fokus pada hari ini. Dan ini bukannya satu topik yang sangat senang, dan ini menjadi satu topik yang menjadi satu, like a nagging problem with most neurodivergent parents, because will my child be able to sustain friendships? Will my child have friends? What's going to happen when my child is out there? Will he or she be alone? Now, those are very, very important concerns. And while you don't worry as much for your neurotypical kids, these are some massive, massive worries for any neurodivergent parent. And most times, actually, don't you think the siblings become the first friends?
Yep.
Yeah?
Memang betul.
Very
Siblings.
naturally so.
Yeah.
Very naturally
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
So let's discuss this a little bit more. Desiree?
Well, Hans tak ada siblings, so he's an only child. So untuk
What
family
about you?
Saya, okay. My childhood was quite unique. So not a very good example of siblings being or cousins being my first playmates. Sebab my kakak is 8 years older than me, and cousins yang memang saya rapat dengan mereka are older than my sister. So sejak kanak-kanak memang saya dah biasa berkawan dengan mereka yang lebih berumur dari saya.
Patutlah memilih.
Yes, this is why saya sangat memilih. And that's why I'm very comfortable with all my kakaks. And so when it comes to siblings, yes, memang I agree. And as I observe dalam kanak-kanak neurodivergent and stories that I hear from Anit, SK, Didi and even Nori, memang the siblings are the first friends. Dari situlah anak kami yang neurodivergent belajar bersosial, belajar berinteraksi, and it works both ways. Kan? Siblings pun dapat understand pengetahuan how to navigate friendships dengan mereka yang lain sedikit daripada the norm. Kan? So but I would love to hear from both of you more on the siblings part.
Anit, you got lovely children who I love to observe, all three of them. Share with us.
They're all very different personalities. And while I can safely say that for Nirav especially, his sibling and his brother at that point was his best friend. And for Tarish, he would make sure Nirav came out to play. And he was the one who used to bug him to come out of his shell. And I think that really, really helped. But going to school, there were certain things that I feel Nirav wanted to do by himself. So if he was playing a puzzle, dia nak buat sendiri. Dia tak nak orang kacau. Sebab dia hyper-focus, nak siapkan dengan betul-betul. So that's when we realised we need to intervene a bit more, because kalau orang kacau, then they go away, go away. And that was probably not socially appropriate. And that was something we had to work on, taking turns, right? And sharing your space with someone else, and having limits to what you do. And I think with siblings, that definitely helps. But we have to go beyond that. And the world is beyond that.
Yep.
And that's when you start thinking this has to be in a wider circle, and probably the school is the first place where such interactions happen. And we need to be mindful that not all children come from similar upbringing, so they are thrown into a group from various socioeconomic backgrounds, from various different types of ethnicities, and that's how we build a community, because they start learning these social cues, which may be quite typical for neurotypical kids to come back and discuss with parents, but not so for the neurodivergent.
Yeah.
So, Kakak SK, I think at Oasis Place, we learned with you on some of the tools that these children need. And could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, thank you. In fact, I, as mentioned before, believe that we need to provide opportunity for our neurodivergent families, actually, not only the individual, to learn very in a structured way how to be friends in a safe space. And that learning, maybe before I go to the Best Buddies program that we host, I just want to return back to the sibling. What I observe in our two kids is both our sons had an environment, a safe environment. So going back to the safety of socialization, socialization is very complex. Amat rumit. Yeah, unspoken, marah-marah lah, merajuk lah. All these emotions are very high demand on some individual who's not naturally have the ability to socialize. So
I remember that because we had to teach Nirav an entire graph of what does this one? Happy,
yes,
sad,
yes,
worried, angry. So these were things that were taught in such a structured way when I don't remember learning it that way.
because kalau kami typical, as we say, we learn naturally.
Yeah.
And we absorb it without being so obvious, not so obvious that actually we learnt it. Yeah. Tapi dalam keadaan yang structured, example the Best Buddies program you mentioned, is basically essentially the awareness is you then learn these emotions. We break it down that every emotion has a reference. Yeah. Happy feels or look like that. Sad feels or look like that. And of course, with our children, some may have difficulty feeling the word, or rather, more importantly, have difficulty expressing to us that they can feel the word. Sebenarnya, they can feel the word. But because of their communication challenge, dia tak dapat mengucap what they feel. So that is the difficulty, that complexity. They actually feel sad. Yeah, tapi dia tak boleh mengucap. So the learning part here is to help them break those very complex emotion, happy, sad, excited, all the different emotion, and use the different way they learn, whether visually, right, or by sound. You have to be very creative. So part of a structured program of learning socialization may start with learning emotion. Yeah. Then moving on, having a environment where we model what does friendship look like. Can you imagine ramai ibu bapa actually feel very what they have to learn it? Sebenarnya what I want to say is they can. Mereka boleh mempelajari socialization ini. And that's why when we create a safe environment, we structure it, we show it, so we learn them social, emotional competency. Yeah? And from there, we do little parties, we do gatherings, and they are in a safe environment to be where at the takat of their ability, even at socialization. In a similar way, when we say, everybody wants to look at their intellectual performance. So in the socialization competency, that's the word we use, because sometimes when you use skill, it's very hard. Yeah, and there are many actually feedback. Kalau skill saja, actually we are lacking the response that the individual feel about that socialization behavior or need. Yeah. So it sounds very complex, but sebenarnya it's role modeling, breaking it down, providing an opportunity. And in the program for Best Buddies, we actually are an international chapter where it is actually a movement to create a friendship for teenagers in this instance between a typical peer and a buddy who is neurodivergent. And we will have activity like outdoor. They go climbing, they go bowling, as well as indoor activities like bowling. So very activity based to create the environment.
That's great, because I know with Nirav being part of the Best Buddy program, he actually enjoys it. In fact, he reminds me when it's going to be and where he needs to be at what time. So there's such a enthusiasm that he really, really enjoys going. And I think he's gained a lot. And for me, I think when I attended the closing of your last Best Buddy camp, and he and his neurotypical roommate, who was a Boy Scout, they'd done an overnight camp, won Best Bromance. And
Wow.
I was so happy because buat kali pertama, saya rasa, okay, socialization is something dia boleh buat. Yeah, so it took a long time, but thanks to that program, I really thought he could do it.
So Anit, that is an extension. The program that you mentioned where they stay overnight is an extension of the Best Buddies to what we create as Malaysia Day Camp.
Yeah.
It's an inclusive camp where we involve even the scouts as friends. Yeah. And it become again a safe setting, and we are so proud of every of the buddies and peers who actually naturally. So that is the part where we saw they actually by desire wants to have friends. Every individual, whether you are neurodivergent or typical, you want to have friends, but your choice may be lesser friend. Or more, kan? As you had mentioned,
Yes.
Desiree. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Desiree, how would you say is Hans' communication or ability to make friends, considering he is not as verbal as the other kids, and he uses assistive communication device.
Yes. So the AAC actually, thanks for asking that. AAC device that he's been using is only for the last 2 years. And he's going to be 9 now. Tetapi sebelum itu, sejak masuk EIP, so Hans masuk EIP sejak berumur 3 tahun. So bila dia masuk EIP pun, most of the feedback yang saya dapat, memang he was ready from a sensory and occupational therapy perspective, memang dah sedia untuk masuk. Tetapi bahagian sosial tu memang mencabar sedikit. Tapi untuk saya tekankan dekat cikgu-cikgu sekolah, kalau he's not ready for it, tak payahlah paksa. For me, I'm of the opinion that he can have friends if he wants to. Bukan sebab mak dia yang nak dia berkawan, because I think we've all been there as children, kan our parents have this family friend, tapi dan diorang ada anak, and then we are expected to be friends with their kids. So that kind of pressure, I didn't want to put that on my child. So Hans went from memang tak suka berkawan or tak pandai berkawan, I'm not sure which it is, he hasn't told me, to suddenly one day it was really a tiba-tiba thing where he realized how fun it is to play with other kids his age, and it came to a point where dia jadi tersangat friendly tetapi kurang appropriate. So dia akan pergi dan tarik tangan sometimes a little bit rough, on the playground, bertolak someone else. Di dalam konteks sekolah atau EIP center, I feel it was still okay sebab ada cikgu, ada therapist dan parents lain faham. Tetapi di mana saya rasa tercabar, this was just after pandemic, bila kita keluar ke shopping complex, dia akan lari and grab the hand of other kids. So I must say at that time it was quite frightening for me sebab number one, COVID was still out there, and secondly, dia menakutkan kanak-kanak yang the other one, right? So in this sense, sebab di rumah memang tak ada siblings lain, Hans memanglah dekat rumah dia seorang je kanak-kanak, similar dengan mak dia masa kecil, surrounded by adults. So di situ saya kena bekerja sama dengan sekolah dia, the EIP center. Together we had to constantly reinforce, of course through positive reinforcement lah. Hans, tarik tangan is not the way, to call your friends. And eventually, then slowly we introduced the AAC device about 2 years ago. Now that I think of it, saya tak masukkan gambar kawan-kawan dia, tetapi ada gambar cikgu. So he can ask for which teacher that he wants, kan? So to fast forward a bit my cerita, eventually in this current center that he's in, he had 2 classmates yang he had developed a friendship with, and I never knew how close they were, right? Because he can't tell me. So I assumed, because I see them in all the gambar-gambar yang ada party, memang ini 3 sekawan in the same class, berpeluk lah and all that, right?
Nice.
And so then these 2 kawan, they did really well dan pergi ke sekolah lain, so they were ready for the next phase. And at that same time, Hans pun behaviour dia macam he had more tantrums, he was more emotionally dysregulated, dan it took me some time. Even the schools, banyak perbincangan dengan cikgu, kenapa is it early puberty ke and all that. And then one day he was in the car with me dengan AAC device. Saya sedang berbincang dengan sepupu saya, and I said, the only thing yang saya rasa memang berbeza is, and I mentioned the 2 friends name, 2 kawan ni diorang dah pindah ke sekolah lain. So could it be that mungkin Hans rindu kat diorang? And in that moment dia keluarkan AAC device dia, and he tapped on the word lonely.
There you go.
And
He's aware.
Yeah, and in that moment saya rasa
Excellent communication, Hans.
Yes,
Right.
excellent communication, proud mama moment. Tetapi I was almost in tears. You know why? Dia belum 9 tahun and he's telling me he's lonely. And to go back to the teaching those emotion, memang ada lah. And on that note, the emotion yang kita ajarkan, the happy, angry, sad, annoyed, don't you think sometimes muka dia orang confusing tau?
Yes.
And also sometimes bila Hans bawa homework to match it, I'm like, yang ni angry ke, annoyed ke? Right? So let's acknowledge,
confused ke?
it's not easy for them.
Yeah.
Let's acknowledge. But how Hans learned the word lonely or even angry is through modelling. Sebab memang di rumah saya membuat conscious effort sejak umur dia kecil lagi to explain to him, because we have lots of emotions, and memang from early on I noticed that he picks up on my emotions and the people around. So if ever I was angry or sad, I take the time to tell, and when he gets restless, I tell him, okay Hans, Amma is angry, not with you, I'm angry at the dog. Oh, I'm angry at this. I'm sad, but not because of you. So he has learned from me directly telling him, and also I think he listens when we talk. So dia faham. And on that note, dia pun belajar guna the go away button recently. In a very cheeky way, dia dah jumpa the go away button. So now,
Dia nak halau orang ke?
yes,
Dia nak
it's a cheeky. It's a cheeky thing lah. You pergi dekat dia ni, go away. It's very cute and adorable.
So I just want to pick up a couple of things from that lovely sharing you have, and it's this. We always look at the neurodivergent individual to learn the socialization, kan? Sebenarnya socialization is 2, 3 and more ways.
Yes.
And what can you do? And this is my, if you like, invitation. I invite that every individual listening to this, and please share it. When we are aware and we will engage, it's actually the typical person who should then use empathy in understanding that, if I may use Hans as an example, once they are aware, this child may have, I'll use a bit technical word, disinhibition. That is the socializing learning we are trying. They cannot help themselves, but it's not dangerous.
No, it's not.
The fear, we spoke about earlier about the fear. If he holds the other child, it's because he can't help it.
Yes.
The word always ring in my ear. Joshua will say to me, "Mom, I tahu, I know," he will say, "but I can't help it." Memang dia ada kesedaran that is not appropriate. So actually, I strongly believe that Hans understands.
Yes.
But he's not able to help it. Not yet. I would like to hope that with time of learning and the therapy that you're putting in, the brain will mature, and to whatever extent that inability to help beyond appropriate will get better and better. So we then, I want to share that beautiful story, Desiree, that we went out for lunch. And of course, Hans started to get busy. He decided that he preferred to go to the table next door, Now,
Which had two other people sitting at
two
it.
other people sitting there. And I want to give a shout out to these two people if you're listening to this podcast. They were amazingly kind, empathetic, patient.
Inviting.
They were kind.
Yeah.
And they just allowed Hans to move between our tables. In fact, Hans chose to sit at their table, obviously, because we wanted to retrieve the mobile phone from him at that time. So Hans learned that I'm going to be at this people's table. Now, what I want to say is, it is the rest of us too who are typical, who need to be aware, understand, and that was actually an excellent socialization moment for Hans to understand that it is a safe space. And I think with that kind of opportunity, when we go out to malls, and now I have to say more malls are starting to be more aware that
Definitely.
at the mall, their own staff, their shopkeepers are starting to be interested to learn. When you have an autistic individual, what can you, at least if you don't know what to do, you can be kind.
Yes.
Yes.
So I want to say that socialization, it's not just onto our neurodivergent individual. It is onto kesemuanya kami. Kita actually have to be aware that the socialization is different.
Yes. On that note, that is really what, when we say walking the talk,
Yes.
this is it. We ask for inclusion, we ask for accommodation, but how often are we letting that happen? So in that moment, in that restaurant, bila Hans pergi ke meja sebelah, what is your first reflex sebagai ibu?
No, come back,
Right?
come back.
And in that moment, kakak had that reflex for me. Leave him, Desiree. Let's see what the reaction of those two people are. And in that moment, I was glad for the reminder, because without kakak there to remind me, and because having her there, I felt more brave and supported. I was brave enough to say, okay, this is the time, walk the talk and see what happens.
And the experiment worked.
It worked.
Excellent experience.
Yeah.
And don't forget, even the waitresses in the restaurant were very accommodating. We didn't have to say anything.
We didn't have to say sorry, not even once.
So well done to the restaurant.
Yeah.
Well done to the two people at the table with us, next to us.
Next to us.
Okay, we have gone on for quite some time just to discuss this big topic, dan kami hanya dapat mengupas mungkin satu layer daripada layer, ada 5 layer berkenaan topik ini. But I think I'd like to end with this. Sebagai keluarga dan ibu bapa kepada anak neurodivergent, kita banyak menghadapi cabaran bagaimana nak prepare our children for this socializing beyond firstly the home to the school and then to a bigger environment. Perhaps we could invite everybody to share some stories about their experiences, what has been positive, what has been negative, and we could then continue this discussion at another episode when we have all of us here together.
Yep.
Because you have semasa mereka kecil, bila anak tu neurodivergent, walaupun tak appropriate sangat, mungkin ada orang yang akan bersabar lebih kerana mereka cute kan? And then not just cute, but they give them more leeway, I would say, right? Dan mereka pun akan oh ni budak. Tetapi bila mereka semakin membesar, tetapi menunjukkan tahap socialization yang masih budak-budak, itu menjadi satu cabaran. Bagaimana untuk memahami sebagai seorang bystander bahawa hanya perkembangan socio-emosi budak ini mungkin tidak sama dengan budak yang lain. So, as Kakak SK just said, listen, show empathy, be kind,
Yep.
and allow more people, because this is why we have kita family. Kita nak memupuk perasaan dan masyarakat majmuk yang semua akan tolong-menolong dan menyebabkan orang yang neurodiverse pun rasa safe. Yes.
And included.
And included.
So
yes.
be brave and be ready to be open.
So any last words, Desiree?
Oh, I just said it.
That's it.
Be brave and be ready to be open. When people offer an opportunity for inclusion, be brave and accept it.
I want to press in, socialization is not about the neurodivergent individual. It's about you, it's about me, it's about us.
Yes.
Together, jadikan social.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Please continue to like, share, subscribe, and listen to us on social media channels, on Spotify, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on TikTok. And continue to share your comments. And if you like something that we've discussed, please drop a comment. We would love to hear from you. And even if we don't specifically read out your comments, trust me, we discuss them on a daily basis.
We read them all.
We read them all. We feel you, and continue to share so that we feel included too. Thank you very much. Jumpa lagi.
Bye.